This program of God's Point of View by Reverend D. Earl Cripe is read by Eric J. Miller. We'll begin with Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. This is Herod the Great, the most powerful and paranoid of all the Herods. Wise men came from the east. Where was the east that is here spoken of? Was it just a direction, or was there a specific country or territory involved? In other words, can we pin down where these men came from? Any analysis will have to be approached with caution because the Bible tells us only that they were from the east, and commentary that is too dogmatic is forbidden here. There are a few things that we can offer to help direct our thinking. These men came from an area that acknowledged the Old Testament scriptures as having efficacy. Otherwise, they would not have known about the coming of the Christ, and they would not have regarded it as being important if they had known about it. This would seem to rule out the pagan river cultures of Ur of the Chaldees and Padan Aram. The religion of the Jews and the Old Testament was highly regarded in places in Africa as a result of the Queen of Sheba's encounter with Solomon, but Africa is not to the east, which would also include Egypt. Asia was, of course, east, but there are problems that make it certain that the home of the wise men was not in Asia. Asia was settled by the descendants of Japheth, the middle born of Noah's 3 sons. The great religions of the world, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, have all come from the descendants of Shem. Practically speaking, the Japhethites, which include Europe and Asia, have no exposure to Judaism or the Old Testament scripture, and no regard for it either. Of course, Europe is not east, but Asia is. There are so-called religions that have come out of the East, such as Hinduism and Shintoism, but these are not really religions at all. They are the warped philosophies of pagan minds trying to explain man's origins and his behavior. They did not know, nor did they believe in the God of Israel and the Bible. There is no reason to believe that the 3 wise men came from Asia. One possibility is Idumea, the ancestral home of the Herods. The Idumeans were the descendants of Esau and therefore often referred to as half-Jews. I am not sure that designation has much meaning, but it is true that Esau, after his reconciliation with Jacob, had a strong interest in the future of the Jews, as did his people. There were no practitioners of classic Judaism in Idumea, but they had sort of a modernistic form of Judaism where they professed to believe the Jewish scriptures. The descendants of Esau also felt that the inheritance of the kingdom was rightfully theirs, since their father was the oldest son of Isaac and the rightful inheritor of the birthright and the blessing. In their view, it had been stolen from Esau by deceit, and they never accepted the right of Isaac to give it to Jacob. For that reason, they were very interested in the coming of the Messiah from the lineage of Abraham. The Idumeans were a very intellectual and philosophical lot, and many of the corrupting influences came out of Idumea. A careful study of the book of Job will reveal that the religion of the descendants of Esau was very near the true religion on an intellectual and philosophical plane, so much so that many Christian ministers have been taken in by the heresies of Job's comforters. 2 other possibilities are Moab and Ammon. These were also relatives of the Israelites, being the countries that grew up from the incestuous sons of Lot and his daughters. They were always interested in what the Jews were doing. They tried to get in on the rebuilding of Jerusalem in the days of Ezra and Nehemiah, and they too at least claimed to believe the prophets, the Old Testament writings, and the God of Abraham. But while Idumea, Moab, and Ammon were east of Israel across the Jordan River, they were not very far east, and they were more to the south. Ammon, the farthest north, was directly across the Jordan River from Bethel and just a little north of Jerusalem. Moab was from Bethlehem on the north to Moab was from Bethlehem on the north to Sor on the south, just east of the Dead Sea. Idumea, or Edom, lay from the southern tip of the Dead Sea and the southernmost part of Judea, reaching to the northern border of the Red Sea. It was east, but also south of Israel, reaching west to the Mediterranean. Today, ancient Ammon is Amman, and Moab is Dibon, both in Jordan. Idumea of the Christ's time is divided up. Israel's Negev desert is the center part of it. Northern Egypt is the western part, and the eastern part lies in Jordan from the port city of Aqaba on the Red Sea north of Kafak in Jordan, at the south end of the Dead Sea. It is possible that the wise men came from one of these three countries. Another possibility that has been held up by many scholars is Babylon. Remember that many Jews, some of them devout, stayed in Babylon and did not return to Israel when the Jews were given permission to leave their captivity. The first of these exoduses from Babylon was in the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, which is modern-day Iraq. This is recorded in the book of Ezra. The second part was during the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, and it is recorded in the second book of Ezra, which is also referred to as Nehemiah. Nehemiah in the Septuagint is the Greek Esdra Deuteron and the Latin Liber Secundus Esdrae. Both names mean the second book of Ezra, but we know it in the King James as Nehemiah, and that is an appropriate title also. According to Alfred Edersheim, in his masterful and legendary book, The Life and Time of Jesus the Messiah, many of these were influential and wealthy people, and a strong and orthodox society of Hebrews in the midst of the Babylonian city and culture developed there. This is a fascinating study in itself, but it is not useful to us here, and we must not go on with it. My point is simply to say that there is some reason to believe that the three wise men came from Babylon. But the Babylonian government did not encourage Judaism, and they would not have supported any movement that would enthrone another king in an adjoining country. The logistics necessary for this journey would have been difficult to organize in Babylon. Do I have a personal conviction about where these wise men came from? Yes, I do. I believe they were descendants of Esau from Idumea. They were challenged by Herod when they came looking for the Christ child because they were from his own country in nationality. Herod had the power of Rome behind him and was not afraid of Babylon. Men from Babylon in Jerusalem looking for the king of the Jews would likely have incurred Herod's suspicion and opposition, but he was very cooperative with the wise men, further indicating to me that they were from Idumea. But my conviction about this is not particularly important. Whoever they were and wherever they were from, they were devout and believing men who looked for the Christ. They knew and believed the Scriptures and came with their gifts to worship the incarnation of this long-awaited King from heaven into this world. We'll read again the first two verses of Matthew chapter 2. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. They were from the east, and they saw his star in the east. What does this say to us? While the language is a bit elusive, the thought is simple. These men from the east told the people of Judea that they could see his brilliant star all the way from the east. It does not mean that they were looking to the eastern skies to see the star. What is this business about their having seen his star in the heavens? Is this a biblical thing? Does God use stars in this way? Let me remind you of a couple things in this regard, and then we will move on. The first is the stated reason for stars in the creation. The record is found in Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 19. And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and for years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. One of the purposes of the stars is that they would be for signs. Now, I am not a mystic or a charismatic, and I know you can go much too far and too fast with this if you are not careful. But as always, we must resist the temptation to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The great God who made the stars can use them any way he wants to, and we are alerted here in Genesis that he will use them for signs of various types when it serves his purpose. That leads us to the second point. The prophet Joel prophesies that there would be signs in the heavens connected with the day of the Lord. That term can be rather narrow or it can be broad. In the case of Joel's prophecy, it had to do with his incarnation, his resurrection, and his coming back to us as the Holy Ghost to dwell in the church at Pentecost. Here is how that prophecy reads from Joel chapter 2, verses 30 through 32. And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. And it shall come to pass, that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as the Lord hath said, and in the remnant whom the Lord shall call. Part of Joel's prophecy tells us that there will be signs in the heaven above. Isaiah chapter 9 verse 2 says, The people that have walked in darkness have seen a great light. They that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them hath the light shined. And in Numbers chapter 24 verse 17 it was written, I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab, and destroy all the children of Sheth. In Isaiah chapter 60, verse 3, it is written, And the Gentiles shall come to thy light, and kings to the brightness of thy rising. This is a prophecy that goes far beyond the birth of Christ, but it is one of the places where his light in the heavens is prophesied. There are other things in the book of the prophets and the Psalms that help the faithful and knowledgeable men of the old dispensation to know when and where the Messiah would come to this earth. When the Lord of the universe, who made the stars, comes into this world in the greatest program in the history of the universe, which is to enact the plan of redemption, no one should be surprised, startled, confused, or scandalized when the heavens are called upon to acknowledge his presence. Matthew chapter 2, verses 3 through 8. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah? For out of these shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when you have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. These wise men came to Jerusalem and began to inquire about where they could find the one who has been born King of the Jews. The star had so far led them to the area, but they did not know specifically where to find him. They must have thought that it would be easy information to obtain, since surely everyone in Jerusalem would know. If so, they were disappointed. Apparently, no one that they talked to could tell them. From the record, it is hard to escape the conclusion that many of the people were at the very least indifferent and perhaps hostile towards the Christ child. It says, When Herod and the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Why were the people of Jerusalem troubled? Their Messiah had just been born. Before we are through with this study, we will understand fully what now seems to be a paradoxical mystery. The word soon got back to Herod that someone was asking about the King of the Jews. This was the Herod, remember, who was so insanely jealous of his kingdom and power, and so worried that the Jews would take it back over that he had killed his own wife because she had Maccabean blood in her veins, along with his mother-in-law and his own 2 sons. But he knew that if he told these devout men why he wanted to find the child, they would not help him. So he feigned a wholesome interest. He too wanted to find the King of the Jews so he could worship him as they did. The wise men believed this lie and promised to tell Herod what they knew. They told him that the scriptures said the Christ child would be born in Jerusalem. They cited the prophecy of Micah 5. They cited the prophecy of Micah chapter 5, verse 2. But thou, Bethlehem, Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting. The fulfillment of this prophecy actually took place at his birth, and was first noted when the angel told the shepherds that the Savior was born that day in the city of David. But the prophetic writing was not cited until here, and so we have waited until now to add it to our tally of prophetic fulfillments to the nation connected with the incarnation of God and his coming to the nation as man, servant, and king. Today we have 5 more fulfilled prophecies to add. Micah chapter 5 verse 2, Isaiah chapter 9 verse 1, Joel chapter 2 verse 30, Numbers chapter 24 verse 17, and Isaiah chapter 60 verse 3. Back to Matthew chapter 2 verses 9 and 10, when they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. The star had led them all the way from the east, and would yet lead them. It could have led them to Jesus without their having to ask, but all of these events were being divinely orchestrated and directed. God's will and plan was being worked out here. It was not the will of God for the wise men to find Jesus without having to ask around town and for Herod to hear about it. In the next program, we will see why. Now the star appears to them again and leads them to the exact house where Jesus is to be found. Matthew chapter 2, verse 11, And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, and frankincense, and myrrh. Jesus is here referred to as a young child, and Mary and the child are in a house, not in the stable. How much time has passed since the birth of Jesus, do you suppose? Does the Bible say? It says something that gives us a fair idea, and we will look into that next time. Read more at godspointofview.com. A copy of this book is available from Amazon in Kindle and paperback format. Link in the description.